Hey YouTube, what's going on? Fallout here. Bungie dropped a big-ish TWID with a lot of info on the Edge of Fate, so I am here to give you the short version. Tune in to our next developer stream. Join us on Tuesday, June 24th at 10 a.m. Pacific time as we give an in-depth look at the Edge of Fate. We'll have the dev team on the floor ready to share many details about Armor 3.0 and the new stat ability system to show you some new weapons and more. Everyone watching our developer stream on the Bungie Twitch channel for at least 15 minutes and with their Bungie ID linked will earn the Astromancy emblem as a Twitch drop. Rite of the Nine continues. Guardians, the Emissary, and the Nine still require your attention. After making all dungeons available last week and turning on increased rewards for them, we are now entering a new Rite of the Nine cycle. All dungeons remain active and can be played at players' leisure, but only one of them has increased rewards active, so you can go back and farm for resources and weapons if you're still chasing some of them. We have another update coming on July 1st. The Emissary will start giving away non-area engrams that are filled to the brim with hand-picked cosmetic rewards spanning multiple years of D2 content. Some are newer, like hollow chips, and others are a blast from the past, like Crimson Days emotes. Check the calendar below so you don't miss anything that is coming. Until June 24th, increased currency drops will be active for all dungeons. From June 24th, all dungeons are available, and one will have increased currency rewards and a chance for weapons to drop from enemy kills, as well as increased loot from the final boss chest when completing all encounters in the featured dungeon. Week of June 24th, Spire. Week of July 1st, Ghosts, and week of July 8th, Prophecy. Starting June 24th, the Emissary will offer a handful of exotics for players looking to round out their exotic weapon arsenal. Still no info, more will be added each week through the Edge of Fate launch, according to Bungie. From July 1st until July 15th, players can earn non-area engrams. Starting July 1st, players may purchase non-area engrams using 350 non-area manifolds at the Emissary, up to 20 during Rite of the Nine. Starting July 8th, players will be awarded one additional non-area engram each day just for signing in. Just be sure to claim it from the Emissary. From July 8th until July 15th, Lootapalooza will begin. Increased currency rewards and weapon drops from enemies in all dungeons, even more increased loot from the final boss chest when completing all encounters. Alright, next up, how melee damage is changing in the Edge of Fate. Hey there, it's the D2 Sandbox team ready to talk about one of the most significant systemic overhauls coming with the Edge of Fate: additive melee damage stacking. The short version is almost all sources of increased melee damage are buffed. Oh god, all sources of increased melee damage stack at full efficiency in PvE, and we are using additive damage increase calculations for melee damage. How melee damage worked in the past. Currently in D2, most sources of increased damage in D2 are multiplicative. Two hypothetical 50% damage increases, a 1.5 times increase to damage, are multiplied together for a total 125% or 2.25 times damage increase. This approach to damage increases has some problems. For one, the more damage increasing effects applied at a time, the more powerful they all become, which means that the best builds and strategies can start to revolve around simply having as many buffs as possible. This is a pattern we saw in D2 prior to the mutually exclusive empowering damage buff systems for weapons. Additionally, balancing the game becomes more and more difficult the more sources of increased damage we add. We do not want to have to choose between bosses being one-shot by players who are stacking as many buffs as possible, or bosses feeling like bullet sponges to players who are not. How melee damage will work now. When the Edge of Fate is released on July 15th, melee damage increases in D2 will be additive. That means two hypothetical 50% damage increases will be added together for a total 100% damage increase. This does result in a lower damage ceiling for melee abilities, and it's unlikely that most bosses will ever be one-shot with melee abilities going forward, but because we do not need to worry about someone stacking these melee buffs and trivializing most content in the game, we can do two very cool things. We are buffing almost all effects that increase melee damage, some of them double the damage they do now. In PvE, melee damage increasing effects always stack at full value if applicable. Our goal with these changes is to make sure it's much easier to create a personalized build that works the way that you want. Many potential combinations of melee abilities and build crafting atoms are now much stronger than they were. We are very excited to see what melee builds y'all cook up in the Edge of Fate with these new changes. Systemic updates. In this new system, every effect that increases melee damage has been converted to use additive damage stacking. Every item that has been changed as part of this has been listed below, with a single exception. The new melee stat introduced with Armor 3.0 increases the damage of melee abilities when going over 100 points up to an extra 30% at the 200 stat. The damage bonus provided by the stat is considered to be an increase to the base damage of a player's melee attacks and abilities and is multiplicative with other damage damage increases. In short, if you're putting together a melee build, you'll want to get your melee stat as high as possible. Additionally, melee damage no longer scales scorch and ignition damage generated by melee attacks. The logic behind this change is similar to the logic underlying the jolt damage scaling changes we made a while back. We think it's healthier for elemental verbs to have a consistent effect regardless of the source that is applied to them. We have opted for a more targeted change here, and Incinerator Snap and Consecration Slam remain powerful options both as centerpiece abilities in melee-focused builds and as potent damage-focused tools in other builds. Regarding glaives, as part of our melee overhaul, we are revisiting the role of glaives in the sandbox. We would like glaives to find a more permanent home in melee-focused builds where they provide a defensive tool to help you close in on your target and a faster and more potent unpowered melee ability than Guardians would have otherwise. That's right, Glaive Melee is considered an unpowered melee ability in the Edge of Fate. Anything that increases the strength of unpowered melee abilities will now increase the strength of the Glaive Melee, including the melee stat. This does come at a cost. While glaives have a much clearer role and have a higher damage ceiling, we needed to reduce their base melee damage in PvE to bring it more in line with an unpowered melee attack. But even after these changes, Glaive Melee has a much higher damage per second output than unpowered melee attacks do. In short, if your build relies on unpowered melee damage, glaives will be the best way to increase your unpowered melee DPS even further. Glaive Melee is now considered to be a type of unpowered melee ability. They now receive melee damage increases at full effect in all cases where an unpowered melee ability would, including the damage increase from Syntheseps, Knockout, Offensive Bulwark, Combination Blow, Spark of Feedback, Worm God, Caress, Banner of War, and Stylish Executioner. Side note from Fallout, that is a really big change. Continuing on, Glaive Melee now triggers all effects that are triggered by any melee ability. They will no longer benefit from some weapon damage bonuses such as Radiant, as it's no longer weapon damage. Effects that modify the behavior of basic melee attacks, such as the Titan Aspect Knockout that changes basic melee attacks from kinetic to arc, will not affect the behavior of Glaive Melee. Glaive Melee damage in PvE has been adjusted to compensate for their increased access to melee damage increasing effects. Glaive Melee damage against minors and majors has been reduced by 40%. Glaive Melee damage against champions and mini-bosses has been reduced by 28.5%. Glaive Melee damage against bosses and vehicles has been reduced by 50%. Below, check out a list of melee changes we have made to abilities, exotic armor pieces, and weapon perks so that they can shine in the new system. Be mindful that this list does not cover all the sandbox tuning plans we have for the Edge of Fate, just the melee-focused ones. We are covering exotic armor changes in a section below, and we'll share everything about weapons and abilities in a future TWID. Regarding ability changes for melees, all classes, Prismatic, Facet of Courage, PvE melee damage bonus increased from 10 to 50%. Arc, Spark of Feedback, PvE melee damage bonus increased from 75 to 100%. Now works with Glaive Melee at full effect. PvE melee damage bonus is no longer decreased when used with Syntheseps, Liar's Handshake, Knockout, Worm God Caress, 1-2 Punch, or Winter's Guile. Titan, Roaring Flames, maximum PvE melee damage bonus increased from 73 to 200%. As a note, Roaring Flames increases solar ability damage, and Glaive Melee is always... What? We have a little bit of a typo here in the TWAB, so bear with me. As a note, Roaring Flames increases solar ability damage, and Glaive Melee is always... We have confirmation that Glaive Melee is always kinetic. That was the typo. We have opted to follow the rules as written for this one for now, so Roaring Flames does not scale Glaive Melee damage. We have another little typo situation here. That's okay. We have the completed version, which is melee damage bonus is no longer decreased when used with Peregrine Greaves, Worm God Caress, 1-2 Punch, or Synthoseps. Knockout. PvE uncharged melee damage bonus increased from 100 to 160%. PvE charged melee damage bonus increased from 50 to 160%. Increased melee damage now works with Glaive Melee at full effect. Offensive Bulwark. PvE melee damage bonus increased from 100 to 160%. Increased melee damage now works with Glaive Melee at full effect. Melee damage bonus is no longer decreased when used with Syntheseps. Banner of War. Melee damage bonus for user and allies increased from 40 to 100%. Melee damage bonus is no longer decreased when used with Worm God Caress, Syntheseps, or Glaive Melee. The damage bonus provided by Blade Fury's melee attacks is unchanged. Hunter. Stylish Executioner. PvE melee damage bonus increased from 200 to 300%. 300%. Now works with Glaive melee at full effect. Now works with every melee ability if the ability makes contact while you are leaving invisibility. In other words, projectile melee abilities like Threaded Spike will benefit from the damage increase if you use it at point blank. Combination Blow, maximum PvE damage bonus increased from 309 to 400%. Increased melee damage now works with Glaive melee at full effect. Now works with Ascension in PvE at full effect. Now works with Grapple melee in PvE at full effect. Okay, if you're confused on all this, YouTube, I will give a TLDR, I think, of what's going on with the melee changes. TLDR, there is good news and bad news. The bad news is Bungie is taking away our ability to have multiplicative damage buffs in terms of melee damage. They're changing it to additive, which is going to be worse and weaker overall. But the good news is that because they're doing that, they're opening up the doors for more build crafting potential under the hood, meaning because melee damage no longer multiplicative, more things are going to get opened up. You can use this ability with that ability, you know, like Combination Blow, now being able to work with Grapple melee in PvE. Things like that. So good news and bad news together rolled into one change. I do suspect that Consecration will probably be hurt by this a lot, I'm assuming. Sorry, Titans, but as always, we will have to do hands-on testing when Edge of Fate drops. Moving on to exotic armor changes. Hunter, Athras's Embrace, PvE weighted throwing knife damage bonus increased from 200 to 300%. Liar's Handshake and Spirit of the Liar. PvE basic melee and arc melee damage increased from 200 to 400%. Ophidius Bath, maximum PvE throwing knife damage bonus increased from 100 to 200%. Triton Vice, PvE glaive melee damage bonus increased from 100 to 200%. Titan, Heart of Inmost Light, maximum PvE melee damage bonus increased from 20 to 50%. Now increases the damage of unpowered and glaive melee abilities. Peregrine Greaves, shoulder charge ability impact damage bonus against non-champion, non-tormentor, and non-miniboss targets increased from 363 to 400%. Syntheseps and Spirit of the Syntheseps. Melee damage bonus is unchanged at 165%. Melee damage bonus is no longer decreased when used with Combination Blow, Stylish Executioner, and Glaive melee. Damage bonus is still decreased against players when used with Lightning Surge. Wishful Ignorance, maximum PvE Frenzied Blade melee damage bonus increased from 100 to 200%. Maximum PvE Flechette Storm melee damage bonus increased from 50 to 200%. Worm God Caress, maximum PvE melee damage bonus increased from 275 to 400%. Melee damage bonus is no longer decreased when used with Roaring Flames or Glaive melee. Winter's Guile, maximum PvE melee damage bonus increased from 275 to 400%. Okay, moving on to weapon changes. Weapon perks, close to melee, PvE Glaive melee damage bonus increased from 30 to 60%. 1-2 Punch, PvE melee damage bonus increased from 100 to 150%. Now works with all melee abilities. Melee damage bonus is no longer decreased when used with Liar's Handshake. Increased the time the perk is active to 3 seconds. And now we're on exotic weapons. Bastion, Saint's Fist PvE melee damage bonus increased from 100 to 300%. Now works with all melee abilities. Increased the time the perk is active to 3 seconds overall. Monte Carlo, Catalyst's melee attack no longer deals reduced melee damage to bosses, mini-bosses, and champions. Winterbite now receives melee damage bonuses from a variety of sources. Reduced enhanced melee damage with ammo to plus 20% versus bosses down from plus 50%. Okay, we finally got all the melee stuff out of the way. Now we move on to exotic armor tuning preview. We mentioned a bunch of exotic armor pieces in the previous section, so it felt natural to go over the other exotics that are changing with the Edge of Fate. Many buffs and reworks here and there, and just a few minor nerfs to keep things balanced and interesting. Hunter, the Dragon Shadow, and ... It has long felt weird how similar the Dragon Shadow and Speed Loader Slacks are in their effects, with both centered on dodging to get stats. To alleviate some of that weirdness, the Dragon Shadow has gained many of these stats and had its perk updated to fit better with the new suite of player stats. Dragon Shadow now passively increases weapon stability and ready speed. Dodging reloads your equipped weapon, no longer reloads holstered weapons. Activating your dodge ability grants the following effects for a short time: increased stability and handling, increased move speed, increased sprint, slide, and ADS straight wave speed, dear god, increased class stat. Okay, Dragon Shadow is going to be really good in PvP in the Edge of Fate. Speed loader slacks. With these bonuses given away, we took a more PvE-oriented approach to speed loader slacks, allowing hunters to be able to provide a benefit akin to Lunafaction boots to their allies to be able to carry around during higher-end content. Speed loader slacks adjusted the tight fit perk. Dodging reloads all weapons and grants increased handling and reload speed for you and nearby allies. While this buff is active, additional dodges increase the strength of the buff and refresh the timer. Dealing sustained damage grants class ability energy. Mask of Bakris has always been an evocative and visually fun exotic, but largely is used as a PvP tool. We've made some changes to let you play into the Fallen Captain fantasy even more so in PvE, while also pairing well with the new stats. It's also now usable on arc subclasses and supers. Mask of Bakris effects are now active when either an arc or stasis super is equipped. Reworked Light Shift no longer provides a non-stacking surge damage bonus. Now grants plus 10% damage for eligible weapons, stasis weapons, arc weapons, and Lord of Wolves per stack. Whoa. Stacks up to 3 times, while active weapon final blows grant class ability energy. Side note from me reading this, apparently Lord of Wolves already does get a damage buff with Bakris, but it caps out at plus 25% damage, I believe. And in Edge of Fate, that new ceiling will be up to 30%, aka 10% damage buff, stackable 3 times. In short, that looks really good. Again, Lord of Wolves is already a fantastic weapon. Make sure you have it for Edge of Fate, and definitely make sure you farm for a good Mask of Bakris roll. Khepri Sting. Khepri Sting has been a fairly niche PvP exotic for some time, so we wanted to rework it to something a bit more broadly useful and with more build crafting hooks. Khepri Sting removed automatic smoke bomb activation when using a melee attack. Removed True Sight when dealing damage with smoke bomb. Added killing weakened targets creates a burst of weakening smoke and returns smoke bomb energy. Oathkeepers. Oathkeepers have not been quite worth the time investment to overdraw for the damage bonus, so we've tuned that a bit for some better ease of use and a higher potential payout of damage. Oathkeepers increased maximum damage bonus from plus 150% to 200%, fuck me, now provides more of the total damage bonus earlier in the overdraw. Blight Ranger. Blight Ranger's had a rough time, with previous balance changes failing to hit the mark. Despite that, we believe that its most recent rework established a playstyle that fits the fantasy of the exotic. However, its cancellation effect still didn't feel worth the investment, especially due to a challenging bug with how its damage is scaled. So we've given it a bit of extra juice, actually a lot of extra juice. Blight Ranger fixed an issue where cancellation damage was not consistently scaling based on voltaic mirror progress. Adjusted voltaic mirror meter behavior now requires 25% less reflections to reach maximum, fills more evenly, blocked melee attacks now count as a reflection. Maximum cancellation damage increased by 50%, this is in addition to the fix above. Minimum cancellation damage increased by 150%, now always applies blind before dealing damage. Updated visuals, audio, and timing of the blinding shockwave to better reflect its impact. Titan, Crest of Alpha Loopy. Over the past year, we've seen a lot of love when it comes to the new additions of things like the support frame autos. With the Edge of Fate, we took a look at some of the other clearly support-oriented exotics that aren't as popular to give them a leg up to modern sandbox standards. Starting with the Crest of Alpha Loopy, we wanted to keep it subclass agnostic while letting it feel like the one-stop shop for the support Titan fantasy. Crest of Alpha Loopy added additional effects. Sustained damage while behind a barricade triggers another smaller healing pulse. Healing your allies grants barricade energy. Side note from Fallout, this is an interesting change for Alpha Loopy. I think that maybe in terms of endgame PvE content, I mean, Falling Star is still the go-to Titan damage exotic, but after popping a Falling Star Thunder Crash, maybe you could pop an Alpha Loopy Barricade and take extra advantage of Storm's Keep, aka keeping your team alive during a DPS phase and generating more barricade energy. Just a thought. Moving on, Phoenix Cradle. The next clear option was Phoenix Cradle. There's a lot of ways to generate sunspots, but it always felt like you couldn't create them where you wanted to maximize the effects of Phoenix Cradle. So we tackled that while also hitting on a very common piece of feedback when it comes to your Cradle-enabled sunspots visuals. Phoenix Cradle updated VFX on sunspots while the user has Phoenix Cradles to look more clearly supportive to allies. Added additional effects. Dealing sustained solar weapon damage in a sunspot will extend its duration. Providing solar buffs to allies has the chance to create a sunspot at your feet. MK44 Standasides. Standasides ironically left in the dust. This exotic lost its role with the introduction of Juggernaut and other changes that made the melee refund less valuable. We removed the melee energy refund on shoulder charge hit and the overshield when sprinting. These were replaced by more arc-centric perks that turn you and your allies into an unstoppable force. 44 Standaside. Sprinting with Juggernaut active periodically grants you a stack of static charge. Sprinting while amplified creates an area behind you that grants allies speed booster. Path of the Burning Steps. We liked how Path of Burning Steps played in Season of the Wish before the previous changes to this exotic. To return to its glory days, gleefully frolicking with Polaris Lance, we added back some of its bonus damage by tying it to Roaring Flames. Path of Burning Steps. Increase solar weapon damage and solar ignition damage based on the number of stacks of Roaring Flames you have. Roaring Flame times 1 times 2 times 3 grants 10, 15, and 20% bonus solar weapon damage and 5 to 10 to 15% bonus ignition damage. Stacks with surge mods. Reduces the duration of suspend, slow, and freeze effects applied to you. Side note from Fallout, the fact that this stacks with surge mods is really interesting, and it has the potential to be quite good in the Edge of Fate. Keep an eye on it. Abiant Leap remains a potent choice, but we wanted to add a small nudge in efficacy that won't overtune the whole suspend kit. Abiant Leap now increases the duration of suspend applied by enhanced Drenger's Lashes. Actium War Rig. These changes to Actium War Rig go along well with the new weapon stat, giving you the option of building your loadout around the exotic to keep its new killstreak bonus rolling. Think Worm God Caress for auto rifles and machine guns. Worm Gun Caress? Boo. Anyway, Actium War Rig. Auto rifle or machine gun final blows increase their stability, ammo generation, and damage. Stacks up to 10 times. Higher stack counts expire more quickly. Okay, another side note. That sounds really good. Depending on what weapons we get in the future, that will become meta. Keep an eye on that. Could end up being very good depending on how much of a damage buff we get and how long you can keep that damage for at the higher stack counts. Spirit of the Alpha Loopy. Spirit of the Alpha Loopy is also going to be inheriting one of the above changes to the crest of Alpha Loopy. Stoicism. Spirit of Alpha Loopy added. Healing your allies grants class ability energy. Warlock. Starfire Protocol. Empowering damage, as it has been written on Starfire Protocol, has always felt confusing. With the new world of stats, we figured it was high time to clear up this confusion and give this exotic a well-deserved boost. Starfire Protocol now also activates on radiant damage. Increase the fusion grenade energy gain from dealing damage from 2.5% to 5%. Reduced fusion grenade energy gain from final blows from 20% to 15%. Wings of Sacred Dawn. With the release of other items in the game, such as the Manticore SMG, we've seen some gripes when it comes to exotics that ask the player to survive when airborne. So, to give some help to Wings of Sacred Dawn, we've taken a look at just that. Wings of Sacred Dawn. Combatants are less accurate towards you while Tome of Dawn is active. This is similar to Manticore's effect. When a solar super is equipped, solar weapon final blows now grant restoration and reload your stowed weapons. Fellwinter's Helm. For many exotics, it's been hard to keep up with the difficulty progression of activities, oftentimes leading to them being great in on power or lower content, but extremely feast/famine in high difficulty activities. For weapons, we can usually help remedy this with on sustained damage effects, and in the case of armor like Fellwinter's Helm, an equivalent on hit. Fellwinter's Helm added powered melee damage weakens targets. Applies a 15% weaken. Weaken effects applied by the burst via melee or finisher final blows are unchanged. Prometheum Spurs. In a world with so many rift exotics, it's always been hard to make a combo rift feel truly good for how many hoops it asked you to jump through. So with this pass, we've looked at an alternative approach to the combo rift that will also let players hook into other atoms on the solar subclass to allow for more versatile benefits. Prometheum Spurs reworked the perk Embers of Light. While a solar super is equipped, weapon defeats defeats grant class ability energy, and weapon defeats in a rift grant a different solar verb depending on the rift. While in a healing rift, weapon defeats create a pulse that grants radiant to you and nearby allies. When in an empowering rift, weapon defeats instead grant cure to you and nearby allies. Boots of the Assembler. Currently, Speaker's Sight largely outclasses the Boots of the Assembler. So true. Speaker's Sight is similarly potent at healing allies, produces orbs to power your build, and doesn't require you to stand in a rift to get benefits. Plus, Boots of the Assembler's Noble Seekers are just not that smart. So we sent them to college. They now target allies more reliably, spread their healing out much more efficiently, and give a more flexible benefit when they find an ally. Boots of the Assembler. Noble Seekers no longer spawn in waves and instead spawn at a constant rate based on fireteam size. Average number of Noble Seekers produced per 8 seconds is unchanged. It will produce 1 per ally in that time period. Noble Seeker tracking range changed to 40 meters always, from 20 to 40 meters based on time alive. Noble Seekers will prioritize allies who have not been healed in the last 8 seconds. Noble Seekers can now target allies standing in the rift producing them. Noble Seekers will not target an ally more than once every 4 seconds. Noble Seekers will not detonate when passing near an ally they are not targeting. They will still detonate if they make direct impact with an ally they are not targeting. No longer grants extended rift duration on Noble Seeker impact with allies. Instead, grants class ability energy on Noble Seeker impact with allies, scales based on fireteam size. Geomag stabilizers. We enjoyed watching players shoot out beams of concentrated arc energy just as much as you all did generating them, but with the launch of the Edge of Fate, we are limiting some of that unlimited power. To compensate, we took a pass at retuning its sprinting for bolt charge. Geomag reduced super energy granted by ionic traces to 4% from 7%. Retuned sprinting to top off bolt charge. Decreased bolt charge stacks required before sprinting will grant additional stacks from 6 to 5. Decreased the amount of time required for sprinting to start granting bolt charge from 2 seconds to 1. Increased the rate bolt charge is granted while this effect is active from 1 every 1.5 seconds to 1 every 0.33 seconds. That is everything regarding exotic and core changes coming in the Edge of Fate. The remaining mentions in the TWID are focused on Bungie rewards that you can read if you want. I'll link the TWID down in the comment section, but all the important Edge of Fate related change stuff is now over. Let me know how you feel about these changes down in the comment section, and thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.